Hey everybody, I've got something for you today. I'm going to be trying to do another series, not just my Great Depression series, but I'm also going to be try to work on occasional videos about modern monetary theory and some of its fatal flaws. And so this is a pretty quick one. My voice is a little bit scratchy today, so I figured I wouldn't do the whole America's Great Depression one right now. Chapter 2, the notes are ready, I just need to make the video. But anyway, today's video is about modern monetary theory, one of its fatal flaws. And that fatal flaw is a very simple question that you should ask anyone who argues in favor of using modern monetary theory to promote government spending. And that question is, why feed a worse machine? So, with that said, let's get started. So, MMT argues that inflation, and by inference taxation, are merely methods to move resources from what they call the private sphere to the public sphere. However, the problem with this statement is that it assumes that both spheres are similarly productive with their resources. However, this is not the case. I will give you 4 reasons why. And if it is true that investment of resources into the public sphere is even a little bit less efficient than that using those same resources in the private sphere, the question to ask is, why should we bother feeding the inferior machine, which is to say the public sphere, at all, beyond the level of, say, emergencies, serious emergencies? So, 4 reasons why the public sphere is inefficient. Number 1, Pareto inferiority. Basically, involuntary moves in the economy injure at least one party to the move. This violates the Pareto rule. Social utility is decreased by definition, by requirement, because these people would not make this exchange otherwise. The basic rule is that we can only speak of increasing social utility when one individual is better off without causing another to be worse off. For every interaction that's enforced by the state, that interaction could occur voluntarily if all parties consented. The fact that they don't means that that interaction is what we call Pareto inferior. It is at best neutral on social utility and probably actually decreases it. And there's even a further problem with this, because this social utility problem, first off, is kind of a nebulous thing in Austrian economics because you can't really measure interpersonal utilities. But here's the thing, is that even if you're taking a kind of a utilitarian position, what you're assuming here by saying that, well, the government can move this and this will be, and we're going to claim that this increases or holds constant social utility, that assumes zero utility to the thing of to consent, which is a dangerous proposition. Basically, the public sphere hurts society every time that it does something. And by the way, any theory of economics or ethics or whatever that minimizes the utility, the value of consent, will have a tendency to fall into grievous errors, and therefore is a priori suspect as far as actual workable human interactions. Moving on, deficiency number 2 is Mises' calculation problem. Basically, so I'm gonna put a link. For each of these points, I'm gonna put a link or two in the description. But for this one, you can go back to Mises' 1920 paper, The Problem of Calculation in the Socialist Commonwealth, something like that. Basically, the state purchase of goods, what it does is it distorts the price structure and disrupts the voluntary plans of individuals. The larger of a proportion of any industry that's controlled by an organization such as the state that can ignore profit and loss, the larger those distortions are to that industry's price structures, to the point of nationalization, where prices become meaningless in that industry altogether. Even if you don't go all the way to full nationalization of industries, however, you still have problems. You still have distorted prices that send incorrect, inaccurate, and useless information to entrepreneurs. These distorted prices hamper innovation because what happens when you lack innovation in a nationalized system is that you rely on old price information and ignore potential new methods of production. Therefore, resources in the public sphere will often be used inefficiently or destructively, and that use will distort the smooth operation of the voluntary sphere. Not only is the public sphere less efficient, things that go into the public sphere make the private sphere itself less efficient. Basically, quoting Mises, where there is no free market, there is no pricing mechanism. Without a pricing mechanism, there is no economic calculation. So, Let's move on to number 3, Hayek's knowledge problem. Now, it's very easy to confuse Mises' calculation problem with Hayek's knowledge problem, and I use the words calculation and knowledge for very specific reasons to separate them, because you can also call Mises' calculation problem a knowledge problem. But Hayek's knowledge problem is more centered on information, and so we're going to call that one knowledge, whereas the Mises one is more about calculation of values and entrepreneurs doing their work. But basically, Hayek's knowledge problem says that knowledge of how things are and should be done, where things are, where things need to go, that knowledge is dispersed widely throughout participants in industry and in an economy. This dispersed knowledge cannot easily be collected and utilized by any centralized body. They can try to gather it, but they're not going to be able to get information from everybody. And even if they could get information from a wide variety of people, they'd be missing some crucial bits, and it's very hard to synthesize that kind of mass of information, even with computers. You need to have a solid theory on how to synthesize such a thing, or else you're just going to end up with gibberish. Prices and elasticities in supply and demand, what they do in an economy is they efficiently send signals about this dispersed knowledge through the economy. Basically, a person with some of this knowledge sees things happening, and what they do is they react accordingly. They change their plans. They go on with their plans. They buy and sell things. And you see all of the various levels of the economy reacting to that dispersed information without them having to actually coordinate. All they have to see are the way that prices vary. And that allows them to basically figure out whether their plans are good as is or need to be revised. The centralized state planner can't gather or synthesize this information, and generally what he's forced to do in that case is ignore it. Therefore, again, resources in the public sphere will often be used inefficiently or destructively compared to how they would be used in the private sphere. As Hayek says, the data from which the economic calculus starts are never for the whole society given to a single mind, which could work out the implications and can never be so given. Number 4, public choice theory. Public choice theory is the revolutionary idea that politicians are incentivized to use public sphere goods for their own benefit and not for the benefit of the people. They might say that the justification is the benefit of the people, but in fact, those goods are serving the politician's interest. We saw this in Rothbard's definition of investment. Remember, if you check out, I think it's part 1 of chapter 1 of America's Great Depression. All government spending is consumption because the wants that it is serving are the wants of the politicians, rather than the people from whom that wealth has been extracted. Further along this public choice theory point, politicians or governments cannot function like businesses because they are immune from consequences of profit and loss mechanisms. Centralized government suffers from the monopoly problem in that they face no competition, and that they have very little information about how to effectively use what internal resources they have. It's kind of Mises' pricing problem, only faced on something that's vertically integrated. Being successful in politics does not require one to be a successful entrepreneur. You don't have to have the skills and knowledge and necessary to know how to efficiently move things around in order to be a successful politician. Therefore, stewards of public sphere goods are much less likely to be skilled at allocation and movement and value judgment than private sphere holders. That's even if they were actually using things for the benefit of the public, they're actually going to be worse at it than entrepreneurs simply because of the lack of skills that they have. Basically, to bottom line the public choice theory problem, the lack of the profit and loss system for governments encourages the perpetual growth of an unproductive bureaucrat class that interprets arbitrary rules so that things proceed the way they're supposed to proceed in state situations. This is generally extremely inefficient, and it gets more inefficient as time goes on because the bureaucrats continually grow as the rule books grow. As was put in a paper by Tom DiLorenzo, the essence of political entrepreneurship is to destroy wealth through negative-sum, rent-seeking behavior. So, bottom line. Modern monetary theory says that inflation and taxation are tools to bring goods into the public sphere. But what they don't tell you is that the fewer goods we bring into the public sphere, the better off we are. The goods that are going into the public sphere are going to be used less efficiently, less effectively, and less to the benefit of mankind than goods in the private sphere in general. MMT practitioners, if they were honest, would discourage government spending and taxation as destructive to economic growth. That's just true. Instead, what actually happens is that a few of them provide a little bit of intellectual cover for the rest. The rest of those vast majority, they get jobs in government, and they sell modern monetary theory to modern politicians as a justification for ever-expanding state control of the economy, much as early Keynesians sold Keynesian economics as a justification for ever-expanding state control of the economy to those governments. Remember that in Keynes's general theory, the German version, he basically says, "Oh yeah, the government fascist version of the economy is way more suited to the Keynesian general theory, to implementing the Keynesian general theory than a more liberal, more freedom-loving version of the economy." So that's kind of where we're at with that. I think this is one of MMT's major fatal flaws, is that they'll often kind of back off into saying, well, inflation and taxation aren't really bad. They don't destroy anything. They just move things from sphere A, the private sphere, to sphere B, the public sphere. The problem is that they never really examine what happens when goods are brought into the public sphere. Are they used more efficiently or less efficiently? Well, practically every theory that you'll find will say that they will be used less efficiently. And there are cases where the efficiency is effectively zero. There are cases where goods brought from the private sphere into the public sphere are simply blown up, in which case they're completely wasted and no value comes out of them whatsoever to anyone in the economy. And sometimes, in these cases, lives are often lost at the same time, which is again a loss for people and the economy. So this is one of MMT's major fatal flaws. If they don't address why we should be moving goods from the private sector to the public sector in the first place, then their fallback onto this is just a benign way to move things from one sphere to another really falls flat on anyone, and falls flat. And hopefully this will help you understand why it falls flat. You want the goods in the private sphere so that they're used to benefit people and not to line the pockets of politicians and cronies, basically. So that is my short presentation here on one of MMT's fatal flaws. I'm going to try to come up with a few more of these in the next few weeks. The Great Depression presentation is coming probably in the next couple of days, I hope. And thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I will see you all later.